we were just told to go warn the city. Obviously, the High Priest of Tiamat isn't going to be very receptive if we just destroy the tower. You know, he didn't outright say, don't destroy it, but it's a situation where it's like, if we destroy it, then we're basically saying, no, fuck you, Demon Baron, we're not playing your game. And he has two of our friends, we have no idea where they are, and all we can do at this point, at least in Kathleen's mind, is play his game.
It's going to be an interesting session tomorrow, next week. I'm looking forward to it, but I do want to ask you this, Liam.
Okay.
Denora, where does she go from here? Because last session, obviously her eyes melted out of her skull, so she had some issues to deal with. How does she move forward from here? Because, as I explained to you, or maybe I didn't explain to you, the white orb is quite lazy, and really kind of only activates when you're in combat. So what sort of modifications are you going to do with Denora to sort of help her deal with daily life?
Yeah, see, that was the biggest thing. When she was talking to the old lady, she was assured that at least sometimes it would talk to her, and after 3 weeks it didn't. Denora was kind of feeling alone, kind of cheated, actually. That she couldn't experience any of her powers whatsoever because she didn't understand at all what was going on. She wasn't being spoken to, and she's only had one moment that she's been spoken to when she could see the souls of people. So I guess she is learning to not rely on the orb, really, as a partner, as it were, but as a utility instead.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, the orb doesn't seem nice for something light, but it seems something necessary for Denora and for the party and for the continent.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. You guys learned that you could actually destroy the orbs to save the host. Plan on doing that?
Down the line.
Yeah,
he made it very clear it's very strong, so I think it's a situation where we need to kind of be grounded first and figure out what we want to do with the other orbs, because there's still the fact of the matter that there's, 4 other orbs, maybe possibly 5?
4 other orbs.
4 other orbs out there. We need to make sure those are in safe hands, you know?
Mm-hmm.
All those orbs have masters. We don't know where any of their allegiances lie.
Yeah. I think the other point to be made is that with Denora, I mean, we at least have an idea of what might actually be the light orb, like the physical light orb itself. I don't think Greg knows physically where the shadow orb itself is because it kind of absorbed itself into him. So how do you draw out whatever the shadow orb is from Greg? That's another thing that he's kind of confused about, to say the least.
Well, I don't want to explain that yet. Sorry.
I know. No. I'm not asking for an explanation. I mean, that's just one of those other little mysteries about the orb that has to be figured out before you even entertain the idea of destroying it. Because at this point, he's thinking the only way for the orb to get out of me is for me to die, and I don't want that to happen. And the orb doesn't seem to want me to die either. It seems to want me to be. It seems pretty intent on self-preservation. So
well, it needs a host, you know. All right, so I got a couple of questions / quasi-complaints, and maybe you guys could help me address them. One of them was actually in the chat room. This wasn't, not the chat room, the forums, lordcat.com/forum. This really isn't a complaint so much as just a question. Should a player role-play their stats? And that's really just a question. I mean, like for example, let's say you have an intelligence score of 20. You're a genius, right? At least in terms of D&D, you're basically a genius. Should you roleplay it that way, or could you just be you and then just roll based on your stats?
Well, generally, you are going to roleplay a class which is kind of based on stats.
Right.
But to quantify something like roleplaying, like, oh, I've just leveled up and I've got 2 more intelligence, you can't really change the way you act. It's just you act more experienced. You can't really act a number, but you're going to act a personality, i.e. a class. Like, Denora's not going to be an absolute dickhead, because she's a cleric of Palor.
Well, she could be... Well, no, she could be a prick to other non-Palor followers.
Well, she could, but it's not exactly going to be in her nature to go to
That's true.
a Moradin follower.
Well,
sorry, a Moradin follower, because Moradin is a good god, and not exactly going to go, oh, your god sucks.
Well, Chris, let me ask you this. I have an intelligence score of 3. I'm basically Bomar, and I'm in a dungeon with you guys. There's a puzzle here, and me, the player, knows how to solve it, but me, the character, he may not know how to solve that. I mean, he's dumber than salt, essentially. Do I roleplay the stats and keep myself quiet?
I don't. The thing is, I know a lot of people take role playing that to another level than even we do in this group, a lot higher. I'm not someone who really, forces people to play by their intelligence level. I think that's kind of a very restrictive thing to put on a player.
Yeah.
I think if you have 3 intelligence, maybe your character shouldn't be like getting into, fucking textbook debates with somebody. But I don't think you should be able to say, no, your character's not smart enough to figure out that puzzle. Because it just seems like it's kind of a slap to the face of the player. Like, oh, well, you picked this class, you're too stupid to figure out this puzzle. Like, it seems very restrictive that way. What I kind of justify it is have a role-playing reason why your character is that way. If you have low intelligence, explain why your character isn't educated. If you have low dexterity, explain why your character isn't very nimble. But don't be forced to role-play that out, because it just seems like it's going to get more complicated than it is. At least that's the way I try to play it.
What do you think, Skitch? Roleplay the stats or just have fun with it?
I mean, it's one of the concepts some people get into. This is something I kind of played into when I DM'd the Tomb of Horrors thing. Was this whole idea of metagame concepts, like metagaming, you playing something, player knowledge over character knowledge and so forth. And, I mean, it's a legitimately tough thing to do, and, realistically, what the others are saying, trying to quantify a certain playing style to that number and being strictly against it at all times. I mean, if you can pull it off and you can make the session run smoothly and have fun with it, that's great. But if there's a puzzle that you're stuck in, for example, or a situation, and the party's been there for 5-10 minutes, no progress at all, I mean, if I knew the solution, I would project it out anyways, because here's the thing, I mean, it goes both ways. What if your character is a genius, and theoretically, they would know the answer immediately, but you as the player don't? I mean,
right. You're turning the situation on its head, and
right, exactly. That's equally metagaming almost. That's like now the character knows more than the player does, and
how's that possible?
and that's kind of the reverse. I mean, so really, I think ultimately, at the end of the day, as long as people aren't breaking the game intentionally, it's like if someone was reading the campaign in advance and researching for advanced knowledge, that's a different matter altogether. If the player themselves comes up with a solution naturally, then if I was a DM, I'd reward that anyways, because even if the character isn't a genius, I mean, you're ultimately dealing with players here, not dealing with just characters. So,
Well, here's my take on it. I don't care. I sometimes think intelligence scores or any score like that, I think basically every character should be basically adept at thinking. So I don't think it should be an issue. But if the player wants to roleplay his stats, then go ahead for it. And if he knows a solution, then pass a note to another player and he's roleplaying his stats. He could pass a note out of character to another player who could solve it. I mean, because it's a team effort. So why sort of isolate that guy because he's roleplaying a character? At least that's my take on it.
But if you take it to the minutiae, if someone has 8 intelligence and someone has 10, or someone has 6 and someone has 10,
you can't do that. I mean, you really can't quantify like that,
exactly.
because who's smarter than who at that point? I've got an 8 intelligence, you got a 10. Yeah, that's great. I can still wipe my butt relatively well. So what's the difference? At least that's what I think.
Yeah.
But this sort of takes us into another area in terms of role-playing, because this is something we do a lot in Wormwick. We tend to role-play out scenarios a lot, and somebody complained about that, and I'm not going to name names, but essentially what they said was, I think you as the DM, Jason, expect the players to role-play out situations too much and not give them the opportunity to just roll a bluff score or something like that. Excuse me, to roll an ability check rather than actually role playing out a situation. because it seems to hurt players, your players at least in the short term, when they do things like that. And I would say, I think there's too much rolling in my campaign as it is.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when you gave a chance, say, if you don't want to go through all of this, you can just roll X or Y. I remember.
I've never done that. I've never explicitly said, if you don't want to roleplay, then just roll.
You actually did the other day. You were like, if you want to, try to get the horse, you can roleplay it, or you can just roll diplomacy and we'll use that.
Well, yeah, I mean, but because nobody's ever brought it up to me before, and I thought maybe it would be good to express it that, if you don't want to roleplay, just tell me and I'll just do a roll. I don't, But I think that's just my style of DMing. I guess I'm more into the whole role-playing and having fun with it thing. Also, I think we were trying to move along pretty well, and I kind of got the feeling you guys didn't want to role-play out the whole horse situation again. So, yeah, I don't know, but what do you guys think about that? You guys think there should be less role-playing, more role-playing, more dice rolling, less dice rolling? Personally, I think there should be less dice rolling, but that's just me.
Personally, I hate a lot of the different checks in D&D. I hate diplomacy. I hate bluff. I honestly, whenever I DM, I remove those from the game because I think they're fucking worthless stats, and that role-playing should decide whether or not you could bid someone something as opposed to a fucking number. But that's just me. It's the way I kind of grew up playing the game. I like role-playing things out more. The numbers, dice rolls should really only be used when there's a chance of failing something.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you go into a situation, it's like, hey, you could just roll this out and get it done quicker. It's like, okay, well, we could do that if you're scrapped for time or if no one really wants to do this. But I think it's more fun. It's better for the world and the game and everything in general if you just role-play it out most of the time.
What do you think, Liam? You think,
Oh yeah, I think that role-playing is more important than dice rolls. I mean, some things may require a dice roll, say, like Denora's going, oh, I wonder if I know anything about this, and may roll a history, or you may say it outright. But things like diplomacy, like if you've made a kick-ass speech and you've got so in character, and then it's just ruined by essentially a random number, it just feels like you've been cheated, really. It's like you've done your speech, you roll your diplomacy and fail. You've wasted your breath on a random number.
It completely breaks character, too. Like, how can you have that convincing of a speech, but you roll low on your diplomacy, so the guy, like, sure, you're trying to convince the king to go to war, and you have the best, you could have a fucking thesis on why he should go to war, but you botch, and he's like, no, I don't believe you. Why? Because I don't. It's like, what the fuck you old withered piece of shit, I hope you die in a puddle of cum and shit.
Have I done that to you guys yet?
No.
Okay. I don't think I've done that yet. I mean, I pretty much, like, I think I remember having to make you roll an intimidate check when you did the whole wing thing, Chris, the first time trying to intimidate them. But I didn't think it was a given that you'd be able to intimidate people, you know?
I mean, it's up to you.
Intimidate checks are actually written into the book, so...
Yeah, I mean... It's more of a check because it's more of on an individual basis who would get scared by it. I guess that's something I could work on, but
it's up to you,
I tend to agree with you guys. I mean, because you guys have had some great role playing sessions where you guys were talking with Alpert or Muzarog, where I could have been a complete dick and be like, all right, you're gonna have to roll a bluff check or something like that because I knew you guys were bullshitting, but the role playing was actually so good that it was just like. Well, why? What's the point? This is fun. Let's roll with it.
It rolls more well if you don't have to stop. Like you're in character.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
better if you don't have to stop and then roll the dice. It's better if you just roll and there's just.
Well, see, here's the thing. A lot of people in the chat are saying, well, if the player role plays correctly, they should get a bonus or lower the DC. Again, that's still. That still forces it dependent on the random number generator. You can still roleplay a great thing, the DM gives you a bonus, maybe even lowers the DC, but you could still botch and fail that. And that to me, it's always been one of the inconsistencies in the system.
Well, here's where I sort of look at it, and I think, listen, if you've made a logical argument and you're not actually BSing a guy, then... I think really he should you don't need to check that. If you're trying to BS him and you're kind of stumbling over your words trying to do a bluff, and I'm thinking you're really gonna fail that, then I think, then I'm thinking, okay, well, roll a bluff check anyway, and that way, you know, if it comes up on your favor, then it works. Otherwise, the idea I was thinking of that it failing is just going to fail anyway.